Welcome to this final session. When we get to the final session, it always makes me ponder on the nature of time and how it shrinks and stretches, and how when you begin an event like this, it seems to stretch an impossible length into the future, and then you finish it and it seems to have taken no time at all. It's my perception, the elasticity of time. So, time being what it is, I ran out of time to prepare the lecture, for which I thought I'd got a really great title, which was something like "As Now Then," or something like that. So I had to revive something else. Time shrunk to that, so I had to go back in time and bring something forward. So here we are. So, as above, so below, the awe and wonder of the sky, experiencing the above below. So, in the Foundations module, in the Cultural Astronomy and Astrology MA, as those of you know who have taken that module, as part of their assessment, all students keep a postgraduate reflexive sky journal. And some of you have done this, but we ask students to observe the sky for a period of time, like several weeks, and either pick something in the sky to observe, which might be a star, like if Venus is visible or Jupiter is visible in the night sky over that period, the moon, the sun, or the day sky, like a cloud. And we had a sort of an epiphany once when we were having students do this sky watching exercise, and we had a student in Goa during the monsoon, and so the student's experience of the sky was cloud and rain, and that opened us up quite considerably to thinking about the whole experience of the sky removed from what we often have, which is the sky as a particular sort of isolated thing that we look at. So the whole point is the whole experience. I give credit to Dr. Carolyn Gunsberg and Dr. Bernadette Brady, who were responsible for devising this assessment and have been supervising it, and I've been grading and making comments on the results. So anyway, we'll go back to ancient theory, just to sort of segue backwards into Ulla's fantastic presentation from Elio Oppenheim's what he calls the Babylonian Diviner's Manual. The signs on Earth, just as those in the sky, give us signals. Sky and Earth both produce portents. Though appearing separately, they are not separate, because sky and Earth are related. So they are related, and so we encourage students to record their emotional response to the sky, because the idea that you can study the sky, say if you're a scientific astronomer, so you can study the sky dispassionately and feel nothing, just doesn't stand up. If you're human, you feel something. So, and from the heavenly writing, Francesca Rochberg was mentioned in one of the online questions in the last session. From her book, The Heavenly Writing, the identity of the deity in the celestial body makes even clearer the notion that the gods communicated their messages by means of their visible manifestations in the heavens. And so we can look at the sky and we can say, what is being said? And we don't have to imagine that something up there is saying something to us, because if we're all related, there is a simultaneous mutual conversation. At least, not projecting that idea onto the ancient Babylonians or Assyrians, but interpreting that idea in a modern context. And so, again, the visual sky. This is from Hermann Hunger's Astrological Reports to Assyrian Kings. If a meteor, which is like a torch, flashes from the east and sets in the west, the troops of the enemy will fall in battle. And then a separate omen. Saturn became visible inside of Leo. If Leo is dark, for 3 years, lions and wolves will kill people and cut off traffic with the Westland. A separate omen. If Jupiter is red at its appearances, there will be abundance in Akkad. So the point is that all these depend, all these interpretations depend on a visual experience of the sky. So, just go back that slide. So in other words, in this, what we now call astrology, what the Babylonians and Assyrians didn't call astrology because it's a Greek word, there were no zodiac signs, no houses, no planetary aspects, none of the other vast construct that the Greeks developed when they got hold of astrology. So, anyway, the Sky Journal. I did this work initially, look at the Sky Journal, because last year I applied to join a body called the Higher Education Academy. And in order to join, I had to write about 3,500 words of reflection on my teaching and thinking about why we have designed the MA in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology as we have, why we ask students to perform certain tasks, why we grade them in certain ways, and doing that on the basis of educational theory and also my own personal experience of dialogues, conversations with students, student responses and so on. So, this also involves us, exploring astronomy and the visual arts as well, because in the course of this process, students can look at paintings of the sky, read literature about the sky, poems, or write their own poems. So that's what I had to do, was think about how we include such activities in teaching and learning, frame them with educational theory, and provide a methodology and theory. This is all the backroom stuff behind the public delivery of the program. So anyway, since we started focusing on the visual sky some years ago, I'm always whipping out my mobile phone in order to snap, because I think personally what this whole process has done is liberate me into having emotional experiences of the sky and feeling them. And so rather than thinking, oh, that's a beautiful sunrise, experiencing how I feel inside when there's a beautiful sunrise. So students, this is the requirement: observe one feature of the sky for a month, compile a personal journal consisting of reflexive records of observations, including photographs, drawings, items of text, poems that they produce. So they observe the sky, create artwork, and then report critically on both, because academic work has to be critical, self-critical, critical of anything, in a critiquing sense, not in a negative sense. So the journal then becomes a primary source. So as you all know, a primary source is the thing that you study. So in this case, rather than looking at a clay tablet, a Greek manuscript, an astrolabe, a painting of the sky or something, the journal itself becomes the primary source. It is the manuscript. It's the modern clay tablet, the modern medieval Hildegard of Bingen stuff. So that then becomes the primary source. So anyway, I get obsessed by this. So I was at a conference in Corfu in May, the 12th conference on the inspiration of astronomical phenomena. And Corfu town has this wonderful, wonderful roofscape. It's just gorgeous. And here's the sea out here. And so there's the sun. And so I took lots of photographs of the sky framing the roof, the roofscape, but the skyscape being framed by the roofscape. So a mutual relation, there's this line that in fact is the horizon. You know, in our minds, I think if we say the word horizon, we think, oh, the flat horizon. But this is there, then, and there, the horizon. This, by the way, I've just noticed, this person is Daniel Adams, who is about one of the world's greatest experts on the sky law, skyscapes of the Arabic world, not the Islamic Arabic world, but the Arabic world. So just a little feature there. You never know who you're going to notice when you take you look at a photograph. So this is an accidental alignment. Some of you, I know, will be aware of the phenomenon of Manhattan henge. We had a student who wrote a dissertation on Manhattan henge some years ago, and there are now lots of imitation Manhattan henges. So what happens in Manhattan, in New York, is certain times of year, I can't remember what street it is, so you know Manhattan's built on a grid, and at a certain point, it's around probably, I'm going to guess, 51st Street. The sun on a particular day rises at the end of the street and crowds gather. It's now a huge event. So there's no crowds here. This is where my English home is, Princess Victoria Street in Bristol, 6:33 a.m. 28th of June 2024. My local cafe opened at 6:30, so I was already running late. But I stopped. The cafe's just here where I'm standing. I stopped because there was the sun in an accidental alignment at the end of the street. So not asignificant, not a quarter day, not a solstice, not an equinox, but it was at the end of the street. And I just thought, this is fantastic. I stopped and I stood there with the heat, not much heat, but the light of the sun, just feeling amazing, thinking this is it. I would not want to be anywhere else at this particular moment. You know, that was perfect. And there it was. It's a lovely street, and there was the sun shining right down it. I spend part of my year living on the island of Mallorca, where the skies are spectacular, because where I live is almost on the coast, but there's a range of mountains which generates weather patterns, which then generates clouds, and that generates phenomenal skies. And I was just struck by this one. It's quite simple. 11th of June this year, and I just thought this little dash of paint, just because that's what it looked like to me, a paint in the sky, just sort of struck me, and I thought that's wonderful. Almost the angle of it, I thought that's beautiful, sort of like a ballet dancer in mid-air. So I took this photograph and just, stopped and stared for a bit. This was more dramatic, taken from near where my house is. The sky, a sort of fiery red. It felt like the apocalypse. It felt like the four horsemen of the apocalypse were about to come over the horizon. God was speaking. The prophet Jeremiah, the unrighteous will be consumed by flames. So, and then this one, as I come out of my front door, my house in Mallorca, there's this mountain on the right. And the phenomenon that happens that always makes me think about the way we're taught to see the sky. And again, coming back to the idea of the flat horizon as at sea, is that the horizon is created by this mountain. So again, it's like the skyscape in Corfu creates patterns in the sky, but here this mountain creates massive patterns in the sky. So dawn has already happened. Sometimes, an hour and more, the sky is lightened before sunrise. So actual sunrise, it comes over the mountain much later. This is 9:10 on the 8th of June, right? So this is almost at the summer solstice, right? Daylight is really early. Daylight is, in Mallorca by 6 a.m. at that time of year, easily. But the sun rises 3 hours later, and this explosion over this mountain. And so I always think, because I'm brought up in a church-going family, the sort of Old Testament mythology very familiar to me, I always think that's Yahweh, the Hebrew Old Testament God, coming over the mountain, and somewhere up there is Moses receiving the Ten Commandments. That's where my imagination leads me. But my first response is, that is just so beautiful. And where is the sky? Last weekend I went to this small village of Nunny, about 25 miles south of my English home. And I got there. I always check a church, the church orientation, automatically whip out iPhone and compass. It's almost like a, for me that's a really important thing to do, but I'm sure some people would say you've got, a nervous tick. But I know you all share that kind of phone out, compass out, almost. It's on about a 97-degree angle, so not quite east-west, but, was that, intentionally 97 degrees, or they just put it down roughly east-west. So that's good. So it's kind of, absorbing the sky, facing the sky, talking to the sky. And that's the actual sky as it was. So, turbulent clouds concealing the sky. I always think of our student in Goa, whose experience of the sky was clouds and rain. That's a legitimate experience of the sky. And then here's the sky in the water. One of our old students, who has just received her PhD, Ilaria Cristofaro, wrote a dissertation on the trails you get in the sea or in lakes or in water. When the sun is at such an angle, it sends this huge trail across the water. So the sky in the water. So anyway, there's Corfu again. And so this is the direct instruction. This is how it comes through from the back, from the inspiration, and then these machinations in the back room. This is the front end that students see. So a sky journal is a piece of research using the sky as the primary document. You will observe. This is very imperative. This is what you're going to have to do for a month, and focus on one or several particular features recorded either by drawing or photographing. The changes in these sky features, or sky and landscape features, for example. And then we suggest some things. The moon, its phases or rising and setting, visibility of planets, sunrises or sunsets, nature, colour, visibility, horizon location, observation of one or more constellations, the sky's relation to a landscape. So we give 5 options, which but there you can see from that you can sort of observe almost anything, but the 5 options are there because otherwise people are going to think, well, can I do this or that or what? So this is then like semi-official documentation that the university sees. We've got absolutely totally official documentation. For example, the length of an essay or the general topic, which is that defined by the module. And then this is sort of quasi official. It's taking that route that what the university says we must do, and sort of being an intermediary with the students. And so then there's the third stage, critical analysis. It's like the stages of divination that Ulla showed us. So the third stage, critical analysis, is framed within quotes from 2 primary sources. The direction is read. Rather than merely reporting on or summarising this data, you are required to analyse it and consider its significance in relation to one of the following quotations, which some of you will now know. So from the wonderful book Weatherland by Alexandra Harris, to think is to walk among clouds. So you'll see then the student in Goa who revolutionised our thinking about the sky. Don't have to look at stars and sun and moon and so on. It's the sky, and it is what it is. It dictates what we can do. Or from Vincent van Gogh, be clearly aware of the stars and infinity on high, then life seems almost enchanted after all. And then a bit of educational theory from these classic old men, Jean Piaget and John Dewey, who began to think about particularly experiential learning. So instead of learning by rote or learning from books, learning through doing, learning through experience. And John Piaget learned experiential learning, John Dewey learning is active experience. So going and doing something, observing the sky, not reading about it, not looking at pictures of the sky and celestial equator and whatever, but actually thinking, what is this? So active experience. So then this is what I had to do to, create the back end for my application to the Higher Education Academy. Learning is an active process which involves the interests and experiences of the individual children, well, this can be adults as well, rather than being restricted to single subject teaching sessions, enabling the learners to make connections between different experiences, stimulating inquiry and discovery. So it's all about experience. And then experimentation. A scientific, reflective, interactive approach whereby children learn by discovery and inquiry rather than being docile receivers of information. So going out there inquiring, how do I feel? What am I experiencing? What am I thinking? And so another one of our classic theories is phenomenology, about a topic which can, a theory, an ology, which can become immensely complicated, but really just means that you study something, you engage with something by looking at it, the phenomenon of what it is, as clearly as possible. And there's concepts such as that you bracket off your preconceptions, you put them over there, and you try and engage with the phenomenon as closely and clearly as you can. If you're talking to somebody, for example, really listen to what they're saying. So if you're watching the sky, really watch the sky. Try and and then see how you feel. So in relation to our discipline, the sky, this is a statement of phenomenology. This is Ed Krupp, director of the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, quoted in this book, Astronomy in Prehistoric Britain and Ireland by Clive Ruggles. And on the experience of the solstice at Stonehenge, Ed Krupp wrote, one should make a point of being there. Celestial events take place in context. When you see what actually happens in the landscape, you learn a great deal more about it. It is, of course, possible to determine the alignment of a building with instruments, but nuances of light and shadow, details of the horizon, difficulties in practical observation, and many more subjective aspects of a site can only be appreciated in person. And this was 1995. He posted this in an email post on an email list. But this notion of being able to be in a site, being able to look at the shadows, is now considered really important. And our understanding of, say, Stonehenge revolutionised as a result, as we saw in Fabio's talk. And the notion of shadows, as you remember from right at the beginning of the conference, Anna Esteroth's skyscape archaeology scholarship on looking at shadows. And then, enchantment and disenchantment. So Vincent van Gogh mentioned enchantment. There's a whole historical sociological theory about disenchantment and enchantment, which is rooted in the work of one of the founders of sociology, Max Weber. And he argued that basically in the 17th century, due to the combined effect of the Protestant Revolution and the Scientific Revolution, the Western world, Western people became disenchanted. In other words, they stopped experiencing the magic of the world and they just started counting everything and measuring everything. And this theory has been recently more critiqued. It was regarded as gospel truth by many sociologists who would then pose questions like, if we live in a world where everybody counts and measures things, how come we still have people like spiritualists and tarot readers and astrologers who are completely out of sync in the modern world? That's the origin of the idea that a lot of people who don't follow a particular ideology are somehow marginal, or, as we know from Itziar's fabulous talk. So, but this is recently critiqued by people saying, hang on, are modern people really disenchanted? The ordinary people, etc. So, so enchantment, what is it? Marsilio Ficino, again. He wrote here that remember that song is a most powerful imitator of all things. It imitates the intentions and passions of the soul as well as words. Well, the Latin to sing is the word cantare, and that's the root of the English chant, and it's the root of the word enchantment. And in Spanish we have encantar, to love. So enchantment, love are related. So one of the founders of our programme, Patrick Curry, a recent book of his, Enchantment, Wonder in Modern Life, and he says, the heart of true enchantment is sheer existential wonder. So here's Van Gogh saying, that's what Van Gogh means when he says one can be enchanted by the sky. And as Patrick says, following on from encantar being love in Spanish, enchantment can be compared to the state of being in love, in which the entire world becomes full of meaning. Everything is meaningful, and time and space collapse into this world of meaning. Everything many things that you encounter can suddenly become signs of your personal bliss. And Patrick then said, well, you can have a primary enchantment which occurs spontaneously, so suddenly you're enchanted, or you can create enchantment through ritual. And so many religious practices are designed to hopefully create enchantment. And here's Leo Tolstoy putting these words into the mouth of the hero or anti-hero of War and Peace, Pierre, one of the central characters. And Pierre says, "Don't I feel in my soul I am part of the vast harmonious whole? Don't I feel that I constitute one link, that I make a degree in the ascending scale from the lower orders of creation to the higher ones? We must live, we must love, we must believe that we have life not only today on this scrap of earth, but we have lived and shall live forever there in the whole," Pierre was saying, and he pointed to the sky. Tolstoy wrote. I think that's such that passage, that written for a fictional person, I think just sums up for me the experience. Then we go through other people on re-enchantment. Carl Sagan, the great popularizer of astronomy, said, "The universe has a reeling and ecstatic grandeur, not only that it is accessible to human understanding, but also that we are in a very real and profound sense a part of that cosmos, born from it, our fate deeply connected with it." Fred Hoyle, leading British astronomer, "Our everyday experience, even down to the smallest details, seem to be so closely integrated to the grand scale features of the universe, it is well nigh impossible to contemplate the two being separated." So enchantment and awe. I spoke on this issue at the when was it? The conference on the INSAP inspiration of astronomical phenomena in Venice. And this the text was 2009. That conference. The publication was in 2011. So what I did in that paper was I began to think. I was not happy with Weber saying that quantification creates disenchantment, because I was thinking I had experience of looking through a telescope and seeing the moons of Jupiter and the phases of Venus for the first time, and that technology enabled me to have that experience, and I just felt wonderful and connected with Venus and Jupiter. So awe has recently become a topic of psychological and social research. There's a paper in 2003 by Dachka, Keltner and Jonathan Haidt, And they said, their paper was titled Approaching Awe, a Moral, Spiritual and Aesthetic Emotion. So since then, people have been writing about awe and the awe of the universe. So, here's a paper in 2018 by Summer Allen under the aegis of the John Templeton Foundation. The Templeton Foundation, its intent is to create a meeting point between religion and science, rather than assuming religion and science are always enemies. So, Summer Allen said that we can examine or we can acknowledge it has a central meaning, but also a range of manifestations based on psychological predispositions or social and collective conditions. So there's no single way to feel awe. You can feel awe in your own individual way. Not everybody has to have the same experience. So Monica P. Cozzolino, she conducted interviews with scientists who use words such as astonishment, amazement, reverence and wonder. And so she was one of the people who just sort of challenged this almost often unspoken assumption that scientists are sort of totally rational, objective, unfeeling people. They do their science, and the science is entirely independent of the way they feel, and the way they feel has no relationship to their science. So, the point about that is as well that you can be depressed and look at the sky. You don't have to go out and have that experience of the clouds or the rising sun and feel wonderful and I'm in love and all that, because you can actually feel really miserable. Perhaps the previous day, the love of your life just left you. And how do you feel then? And you go out and you look at the sun or the full moon and the clouds. You've got a totally different relationship. So that experience will depend on your state of being at the time and the way you interpret the sky. So, Daniel Luna and Jess Baring said attendees the conference they studied believe we should express awe, but actually they expressed a complete breadth of experiences. And so again, that's why we say to students, experience what you experience. There is no standard. If you look at the sky and you feel really fed up, that's okay. It's the engagement, the relationship, that observation that's important. So anyway, 3 students gave me permission to quote from their sky journals, which I'm doing all completely anonymously. The first one said they wished to be anonymous, the other 2 didn't, but I still, for kind of, good ethical reasons, just decided to anonymise them. So this student number 1, observed the sky from the eastern coast of Sicily, the Jupiter in the evening sky. Remember, Jupiter was visible, very prominent in the evening sky recently, October, November 23, together with the moon when it was also rising. So the student began by, and with some, secondary sources, quoting Bruce Jantz on the concepts of Thormosine and Admiratio, has 2 different experiences of wonder in reference to the experience of astronauts in space. Because, astronauts, there's a whole, by the way, with the overview effect is the effect that's used to describe the transcendental experience that astronauts can have when they look down at the Earth. That is, that's not the student, that is Bruce Jantz. And I put that, I just looked for a photograph of him. He looks like a friendly fellow to me. So, according to him, and so he's citing Plato. Normally we would say to a student, okay, cite Plato directly. But in this case, okay, the student's reading Bruce Jantz. His direct experience is of reading Jantz. Is Jantz's interpretation of Plato that he's reading. And so this whole passage ends up with Jantz referring to a statement made by Socrates, philosophy begins in wonder. So the wonder then leads to philosophy. Student 1 then referred to the film Interstellar and was citing Jacob Herger's paper, Missing the Night Sky. Jacob Herger, quoting a character from the 2014 movie Interstellar, wrote that we used to look up at the sky and wonder at our place in the stars. Now we just look down and worry about our place in the dirt. Quoting that to make the point that there is no standard way to experience. You can be fed up. You can be walking around like this, looking at the dirt. That's all part of the total experience, which we can then examine. So then the student says, with this direct quote, Herger appears to have summarised the ideas I feel compelled to deal with whenever I engage in any sort of prolonged sky journal. On one day I wrote in my journal, Jupiter visible to the east above the Calabrian Mountains, first quarter moon to south culminating, clear skies, no wind, warm temperature, sense of quiet, Jupiter looks bright and dark in a completely dark sky. So just a simple description. And then the student goes on to discuss Max Weber, the experience of, so commenting on Weber, this is not Max Weber being quoted, the student is writing, the experience of the sky through an understanding of symbol and divinity is a practice that has accompanied humanity for millennia. So this is one of our goals in the teaching, is to take students back to a period when there would have been a direct experience of the sky, the air, the wind, the light, the sound, the heat, the cold, the clouds, the everything, completely away from the structures of both modern astrology with its complex horoscopes and so on, and modern astronomy with all its information about how the planets travel and so on, just to experience. And then when the sky is cloudy, October the 5th, the student writes, I wrote, partly cloudy skies, Jupiter is not visible, the gibbous moon is well visible, etc., etc. Its luminosity is quite powerful and it creates a vivid inflection upon the straight. So the moon in the water. I had not had a chance to observe Jupiter over the last couple of days, the student wrote, but I wanted to believe the moon was in the southern portion of the eastern sky somehow to comfort me. I went back around an hour later and the same cloud had expanded, covering a larger section of the sky. It would not be possible to observe Jupiter that evening, so the best I could do was to appreciate what I could actually see. So there again, not choosing, the sky has dictated. Therefore I began inviting details from the sky rather than searching for anything in particular. Both Jupiter and the moon would come back to the east the next day, and I could be sure about it. In that instance, I recognised a faint idea with connection with Plato's ideas on eternity. Referencing Dorian's lecture this afternoon. In the Timaeus, Plato wrote about the moving image of eternity. So then, student 1 had a peak contemplative experience. October 29th, both the moon and Jupiter are clearly visible while they rise above the horizon. There is a sense of culmination, a perception of divinity, as if I were going through a peak experience in my journaling, and that's the photograph, moonrise over the Ionian Sea. I think you can see the moon, I think in this photograph, Jupiter's too faint. So the student is having an experience here. They've been wondering, doing this, doing that, and they're there, following, interpreted through the lens of Plato. Plato's liberated them to have an experience of divinity. So student 1 conclusion. My point of interest was Jupiter, but I was surprised to find out that soon I became more alert to other characteristics and phenomena of the evening sky. The vision of the sky was constantly contrasted with feelings and surrounding conditions such as light, temperature, and wind. At times it felt like observing a faraway dimension while being rooted in a purely earthly environment. The main themes which emerged relate to time and space, infinity and eternity interacted with each other among my thoughts, while keeping in mind Van Gogh's reference to the value of sky observation and the enchantment that can derive from it. This experience made me reconsider Weber's notion that modern society appears to be detaching from the sky, at least from an emotional point of view. The students got to a reconsideration of what they understand about the human relationship with the sky. Student 2 observed the moon. So she comes from a pagan background in which Robert Graves' model, as in his book The White Goddess, of the triple moon as maiden, mother and crone is ubiquitous. So student 2 is I think a pagan priestess. And there's the waning moon. It's so faint you can hardly see it, but that's the reality. Okay? It's almost concealed by clouds. If you can't see it, that's because you almost couldn't see it at the time. Then the student started taking photographs of the sky framed by trees. There's the moon framed by a tree. So I was entranced earlier by skyscapes and the sky. Here the student is using organic life, plantscapes and the sky, knowing that the biology of the plants is actually influenced by the moon, so knowing that. And there's Moon and Venus with rising sun is taken from a street in front of my house. So there's the street light. Okay, so when I started photographing the sky, I used to think, oh, let's not include the cars in the street. Oh, there's a street light getting in the way and so on. Actually, that's part, if you're in an urban environment, that's part of what it is. You know, there's the moon, there's Venus, there's a street light. At our phase in civilization, in our brief human tenure on the planet, we light up the sky. You know. Student 2. The act of regularly observing the moon had an impact on my relationship with lunar symbolism. Throughout my adult life, I've followed a pagan spiritual path, practiced astrology and read tarot cards, all of which had had an impact on my connection with the moon as a symbolic and mythological phenomenon. On 29th of October, I wrote in the journal, I felt a lack of connection to the moon for years, turned off with my discomfort with ideas of the triple goddess, Robert Graves and his endless influence. It's only in the last year or so I've begun to feel a deeper connection with the moon, born of noticing, watching, observing it each night. My mind defaults to meaning-making nonetheless. I sense something sacred or the soul when I gaze upwards. This concept of the triple goddess is still ubiquitous in modern pagan practice, despite being questioned by many practitioners, as for example River Enodian, who expresses some of my own frustration. There's the citation the student used. The more I observed the moon, the less my perception of it was clouded by awareness of this symbolism, and the more I was able to find a more authentic sense of the moon and the night sky as meaningful. I felt I was actually sensing something sacred rather than experiencing an intellectual overlay from my awareness of the symbolism. For example, on 31st of October, I noted that the moon is becoming a symbol of peace at the beginnings and endings of my days. That's a quote from my journal. My inner experience of the moon was changed by my regular observation, allowing me to let go of outdated symbolic concepts and form a more authentic connection. The student's been through a process of transformation. Student 3 observed the sky in general, and the journal is characterised by use of photographs from urban locations and others which challenge spelling mistakes, conventional ideas of enchantment. So the student quoted Clive Ruggles, a substantial proportion of the world's population, especially in Western industrialised countries, may never in their lifetime see or even get the opportunity to see a truly dark night sky. Light pollution has served to remove them from their sky as a source of inspiration. So here's student 3's photographs of the sky. So the student made a virtue of non-sky based phenomenon like streetlights and so on, rather than seeing them as a destruction. He photographed the sky we see. So he was wanting to photograph the sky that you see or we see if we are in an urban environment. I mean, you know, light pollution, I think, is a problem of our times, but nevertheless, if you're looking at the experience that people have, light pollution is part of that. So this was taken from a plane, Orion's belt as seen from Spirit Flight NK299 from Boston to Fort Lauderdale. And then there's a waxing crescent moon as seen from Boston. There's the moon, there's the street light, there's a traffic jam. Okay, all part of the total picture. So we're getting away from romanticism here. Some other person might have wanted to photograph the moon with, gone to Africa, photographed the moon with some, animals or giraffes there or something and some trees. But this is the reality of the direct experience. Waxing gibbous moon conjunct Jupiter from Kelton Street in Boston. Again, there's the moon. Street lights on the photograph. The street light sends off these beams here. There's the roofscape. Image of constellation Cygnus and Lyra. Screenshot from Sky Guide. So here the student has used a screenshot of astronomical software as part of the process. So okay. How do we then articulate this notion of direct experience? The direct experience can be of whatever is in front of you. Okay? So there's the direct experience of the sky, but the direct experience is or whatever is in front of you, which might be, if you can't see the sky, an image of the sky on your phone. So student 3, relating to theory referring to enchantment, the photographs made a virtue of such non-sky-based phenomena. So student quoted, citing John McCarthy, the experience of enchantment in human-computer interaction. So enchantment engaged with paradox and ambiguity, being in play in an open world. This contributes to creating depth in a system or object, etc., etc. Layered, referring back to a previous lecture. Interpretation, even the kind of interpretation that surprises the person interpreting. And student 3, personal connection. The student concluded, I live in Boston, my partner lives in North Carolina. Sometimes when I'm on the phone with him at night, I ask whether he has seen the moon. I might even point out where Jupiter is in relation to it. He may not realise it when I ask, but in those moments I feel connected to him. Firstly, that moves me, that statement. And to the rest of the world, because I know that we are looking at the same moon, despite the physical distance between us. And that moves me profoundly. So then he quotes, because this is an academic essay, quoting from a secondary source, Marceau Gleiser, when we turn our attention to the wonders of our world, we feel the inviting embrace of the life collective. So, personal change. Student 1 questioned Max Weber's widely accepted disenchantment theory. Student 2 found an experiential connection with the moon, discarding a theoretical mythical framework. Student 3 found a way to connect with a partner at a distance. So in summary, placing awe in the sky in an educational context. In the whole programme, history of art, how do we see images? Anthropology, can we interview the sky? Broadening the sky beyond a strict definition of astronomy. Experiential learning, active experience. Defining and experiencing awe and enchantment. Allowing other responses to the sky. Noting immediate environmental contexts. Allowing personal understanding and transformation. And reflecting on academic frameworks. So we end with, to think is to walk among clouds and be clearly aware of the stars and infinity on high. Then life seems almost enchanted after all. And finally, from Samuel Noah Kramer and Diane Volkstein in Anna, Queen of Heaven and Earth, a hymn to the sun. This is Dumuzi or Tammuz, hymn to Utu, the sun. He raised his hands to Utu, the god of justice, and beseeched him, Utu, you are a just God, a merciful God. Let me escape from my demons. Do not let them hold me. So that's a conversation that one can have with the sun. Free me from my daily responsibilities and my cares and concerns, O sun. Thank you.